it's Mr. Danny, and I work at Bluegrass Grain Source. I'm very thankful to Live Green Lexington for bringing you this exciting, fun lesson that you're about to see. I hope you enjoy it.
A great way to reduce the amount of trash you throw away is to compost. About 25% of our waste is compostable material. So it's a great way to lessen that amount that has to go to the landfill. We can still compost in our office, at schools, or even if you have an apartment, by using a similar container to the one we have here that we've made into a vermicompost bin or a worm bin. Our worm bin is basically just an 18-gallon bucket or plastic tub that we've purchased from a home goods store that we've modified. So anytime you compost, you have certain factors with decomposition that you want to consider. One is air. So for us to, thank you, Miss Rachel, for us to be able to get air circulating through our bin, we have used our office drill to drill holes in the bottom of the bin and then along the sides. We put the smaller tub inside of a larger tub so that air can circulate underneath the bin. Some of the holes we made first were a little bit too large, and so we just went back through with a 1/4 of an inch drill bit and drilled new holes around so that the worms can't escape, but air can still flow through the bin. Another consideration you want to think about when you're thinking about compost of any type is also the moisture content. And so one of the things that we add to our bin is we just use a squirt bottle and we'll add moisture. Our bedding or our brown material is actually paper shreds. So in our office we have lots of different papers that we'll shred. This is just shredded newspaper. And so things that you have around your house or your apartment, like paper, leaves, straw, those types of things can be bedding in a vermicompost bin. So that's going to add moisture. And then heat. So any kind of food that you add, food items that you add, maybe apples, tea bags, any kind of vegetable or eggshell, maybe coffee grounds, are all really appropriate for a worm bin. And when you add those, the decomposition of that material is going to create natural heat in the bin. So it should, once you close the lid and you keep it in a dark, cool place, but you don't want it to get too cold. You want it to be about between 40 to 80 degrees. So you want it to be kind of a moderate temperature. That heat will start the decomposition. And then of course, go to a local bait store or Walmart and you look for a specific type of worm. And the worms that we use in our vermicompost bin are called red wigglers. And Miss Rachel is going to talk to you a little bit about red wigglers and maybe some of the fun behaviors and things that they exhibit.
Yeah, so let's pull one out here. Our red wigglers are really great for composting. We call them nature's recyclers. So as they're wiggling around in the soil and in the paper and other materials that are in the compost bin, they are hard at work. So like our bin says, our worms are working for us. They are recycling materials that we don't have any use for anymore and making them into something new. So they're taking old things like paper shreds, fruit scraps, vegetable scraps, coffee grounds, eggshells. They're breaking those down inside of their bodies by eating them and digesting them, and then they're going to produce some waste. Those worm castings, the worm poop, is really, really good additive for our soil, and so it will help our plants grow better and help fruits and vegetables be more nutritious in our gardens. And the worms are really, really fun to look at and observe how they move. So they stretch out almost like a slinky, and they have bristles on their bodies. And so those bristles, the septae, allow them, they can slide forward, hold themselves in place, and reach their back end up to meet their front, then push their front end forward, and they'll continue to move almost like a slinky would. Worms cannot see, they cannot hear, but they are very receptive. They can sense vibrations and they can sense light. So right now, they probably aren't too happy because they are in a well-lit environment and they're used to their cooler, dark space inside of the vermicompost bin. So they're trying, some have even wiggled under the paper towel. They're trying to get out of the light, and they might be a little scared from things like noise vibrations and me moving this plate around as we observe the worms. Worms have 5 hearts, so they're able to give us a lot of love, as some of my students like to say. They need all 5 hearts to live. So a lot of people think that a worm can be cut in half, but that's actually not true. It can be cut in half, but it's not going to be able to continue to live. It needs its whole body, and it's going to cause a lot of trauma to the worm if you were to do something like that. In the winter time, worms will go really, really deep into the soil below the frost line so they can continue to live and then rise back up to the surface. In the spring, they lay eggs, and we've seen some eggs in our vermicomposting bin.
What do the eggs look like?
They look like little tiny yellow cocoons. We'll have to pull one out. I'm sure that we can find one.
Oh, here's one.
And there should be about 4 babies inside of one egg sac or cocoon. They'll be in there for a few weeks, and then they'll hatch. And they'll be really tiny, but they'll grow very quickly. We can also tell if a worm is a grown-up or a baby by looking for this special ring, this kind of more flat area along the worm's body. If the worm has that flat band, we know that it's a grown-up. If it doesn't, we know that it's a baby and it's still growing and maturing. Worms have a very tiny brain, the size of a pinhead. So they don't have a big brain. They have a lot of guts and intestines to help them digest all of the leaves and grass and fruits and vegetable scraps, all the things that they might be passing through their body.
So some of the things worms don't like in their worm bin are very acidic-y foods, like citrus, any kind of really onions or meats, bones, bread items in a compost bin actually can grow in unhealthy mold, and we want to keep those things out, and any dairy products. So we want to keep some things out, but there are a lot of things we can put in. And one of the things that we're really trying to achieve by composting is creating these rich worm castings called vermicompost that we can then use as a soil amendment. So again, this is a smaller bin, and so it's great to use around houseplants or also container gardens if you have an apartment, or even at an office if you have plants or a small garden. This is really great. And so once the bin is actually ready and you're starting to get 3 to 6 months of decomposition, depending on how fast this decomposition is happening in the bin, then you will harvest your compost. And so you want to separate out the bedding and any food material on one side and allow that other side to finish. And then you can come in and separate out the castings. You will sometimes have to pick out worms from those castings just to make sure you just have that vermicompost material. And you can directly mix it in with potting soil, or you can make a nice compost tea by soaking the castings in water and then watering your plants with that several times before you actually mix that compost or that vermicasting into the soil.
And another good thing about the vermicompost bin, if you're doing it correctly, there's no smell, maybe a little earthy smell, but it shouldn't ever smell bad. If so, then we would take the worms out and clean everything out and kind of start the process over.
Yeah, so there are some things you can troubleshoot with your bin. When you start a bin initially, you really want to have a lot of good bedding material, because this is going to be decomposing and the worms can eat that material as well. It's going to help reduce any kind of pest, like a fruit fly situation you may experience. And then if you allow the castings to sit for too long, they may become anaerobic and start to kind of have that rotten egg smell, and you really need to harvest it, keep everything kind of loose and aerated in the bin.
Awesome. Well, thanks for learning about worms with us today.
Thank you.